Hi everybody, welcome back to Small Caliber Arms Review. Today we're going to take a look at 22 rimfire ammunition. We're going to look at a couple different chamberings of it, 22 short, the long, and the long rifle, a couple different variations of the cartridge itself, and we're also going to take a look at why you may or may not want to shoot 22 shorts in a firearm that's chambered for 22 long rifle. Okay, there's the 22 short. That was developed in 1857 for Smith & Wesson's revolver that they designed, and was pretty much known just as a 22 because there was no longer one until 1871. They come out with the 22 long, which is a longer case, but it still has the same size projectile in it. And then that stayed the 22 short and the 22 long until 1884 when they come out with the 22 long rifle. Now this is the same case as the long, but it has a bigger, longer, heavier projectile in it. This is a 45 grain projectile in there instead of the 29 or 30 grain they may have put in the short and the long. Now some of the different rounds we've got here, the short, the long rifle, these are all made by CCI. I have some Aguila 22 super extra shorts. I have some Aguila 22 subsonic snipers. These are kind of a neat looking bullet because it is a 22 short case, but it has a 60 grain projectile on it. It makes it the same overall length as the 22 rifle. I also have some Aguila 22 Super Calibres. Now these are a little tiny. I think they are still a 29 or 30 grain projectile, but there's no powder in there. It pretty much gets launched out of the end of the barrel with just the primer in there. But the chambering should be the same as the 22 long, I would say. Not quite as long as the long rifle, but it's maybe even just a little bit shorter than the 22 long. And then of course I got some Remington Golden Bullets, and one of my favorites is the Remington Thunderbolts. And then also over here we got some Cci Shot Shells. Now these are like a little tiny 22 caliber shotgun shell. There are little 31 grains of BBs stuck in that little plastic case on the end of it. And these can be fired from a lot of different firearms. They might not cycle semi-autos effectively. Okay, I got a special cutaway barrel here. This is off an old Ruger 1022, and you can see right in here is where the rifling starts in the, this is the chamber where the shell goes. The rifling starts there and then runs down the rest of the barrel. Now, one of the reasons you don't want to fire a 22 short in a firearm that's chambered long rifle is just because of powder and lead residue buildup. You can see right in here there's a little bit of a dark area there, and that's right about where the end of the case is going to be. And what happens is when you fire this, that powder burning and expanding out of there kind of stains up the barrel a little bit there, which isn't a big deal because it doesn't really interfere with the chambering of a 22 long rifle. The problem with putting a 22 short is the case is now back here, so when that bullet gets fired out, it's going to deposit the lead and carbon residue back in here a little bit farther, so that when you go to chamber a 22 long rifle in there, it has to push through that carbon and lead buildup. Now that's not necessarily a problem. All you got to do is get you a good quality cleaning brush and clean all that out of there, and you should chamber your 22 long rifles just fine after that. Now another reason that, I mean, you can fire them in there. It's not a problem. Most guns will work with it, especially if they're bolt action or lever action, some of the pump actions. A lot of the guns were made to use 22 shorts. Semi-autos are probably not going to cycle correctly with a 22 short in it. And also, you'll notice that the bullet starts right about here is where it's going to touch the rifling in the barrel. The rifling doesn't start till up there, so that bullet has to actually jump before it hits that rifling, and then it's stabilized to go down the barrel. So it will fire it, and they do fairly well for accuracy, but that jump right there can cause the bullet to tip a little bit one way or the other, and when it engages the rifling and starts spiraling, it's probably not going to be quite as accurate as it would be if it starts out at the rifling without the jump. All right, so if you want to fire 22 shorts in a firearm that's not necessarily labeled as 22 shorts, it will work. like I said, the biggest problem is going to be that little ring of lead residue and powder that's going to build up in there, especially if you fire a lot of them. One or two, or maybe a whole magazine, is probably not going to have any effect on it. But eventually, if you continue to fire them in there, they are going to cause problems with you feeding a long rifle in it afterwards. And all you have to do is get a good quality bronze brush, you know, for the caliber for 22, and clean that chamber out really well, and they'll fire just fine with the long rifles again. There's not many semi-autos that were specifically designed for 22 shorts. There are some out there, or at least there used to be. 22 shorts used to be really popular because they were about half the price of a 22 long rifle. That's not the case anymore. 22 shorts are pretty rare. They are used in some competitions, but actually they're about the same price as a 22 long rifle now. Sometimes they can be a little bit more. I did pick up a whole case of these Aguila 22 extra shorts here for, this is about $39, which is only 500 rounds. It figures out, what, about 8 cents a round? Not terrible on the price, and to me 22 shorts are the most fun to shoot because usually, depending on the velocity, they're hearing safe. And I don't know that there's any 22 shorts that are, I mean, they're considered high velocity, but they're not supersonic. Even this Cci 22 shorts I got here with the 29 grain bullet is 1,080 feet per second, which is pretty fast, but it's still below the sound barrier. And that's usually what does the most damage in smaller caliber rifles anyways, is that supersonic sound barrier breaking bullet traveling out the end of the barrel. Most of the time, the actual powder going off is not that loud, especially in a bolt action or any kind of rifle, anything with a longer barrel on it. When you get into semi-autos and revolvers, you get a lot of sound coming out of the cylinder gap between the cylinder and the end of the barrel. So they're not nearly as quiet as an actual rifle because all of your sound goes out the end. And when you're shooting 22 shorts, they're really quiet. I like them. 22 is probably the most popular caliber pretty much in the world, other than 9mm, because a lot of the European countries use 9mm, but 22 is where most of the fun's at. They're an excellent round for training or practicing or just some really good, fun recreational shooting. Get out there with some pop cans or something and plink away at them, paper targets, whatever you want. They're still used in a lot of competitions, the NRA pistol competitions, bullseye competitions and stuff. They shoot 22 rimfire and centerfire both. But it's just the most fun you can have with a firearm is going to be in 22s. They lack power, but they're fun. Their effective range is going to be probably no more than I would say 150 yards, somewhere around there. And I read somewhere that you really should sight your 22 rifles in at 75 yards. That keeps, especially if you're small game hunting, depending on what your actual use for it is. If you're target practicing at a known distance, go ahead and set it up for that distance. But for small game hunting, you probably want to keep it at 75 yards for a 0 on your scope. And that makes sure you don't miss at closer ranges, because the bullet drop on a 22 is quite a bit. If you zero it at 100 yards, I think you're something like 2.5 inches high at 50, and then it's like, I don't know, 17 inches or something at 150 yards. So it's got a really quick drop after 100 yards. It really goes down quite a bit. But all this talk about these 22 rounds here, and I've got a whole brick of 22 shorts. I think I might have to go out there and plink away with some of them. If you could, hit this button up here to check out some of my other videos. Hit this button over here to subscribe if you haven't already. And thanks for watching Small Caliber Arms Review.